second year of post-transition or post-Soviet transition period. After the election, what happened? Demonstrations. From February 20th until March the 1st, there were many peaceful demonstrations. And this is actually the interesting phenomenon in Armenia, that it showed the rise of civil society movements in Armenia. Georgia had that earlier, by the way, in 2003, 2004. The success of the Rose Revolution was because of the existence of a strong and active civil society movement in Georgia. In Armenia, this was the first testament, the first test to show to what extent civil society was active. And they were active. And the fact that many people started going to Ter-Bedrosian's rallies and supporting him, many of the reports that we had, conversation that we had with people, many people said, we don't support Ter-Bedrosian. I mean, we actually hate him. We don't like him. But the fact that he's the only viable alternative for change, and he managed to rally enough people within a short time to sort of stop the certainty of Sarkisyan winning and the continuation of that policy. That's what made people very active, very supportive of Ter-Bedrosian. March 1st, state of emergency was announced. The police brutally dispersed the demonstrators, took Ter-Bedrosian home, and they said, he was practically put under house arrest, but their argument was that, no, it's not house arrest. He can leave at any point, but we cannot guarantee his safety. Well, I would call that house arrest. But there are good and bad things about what happened. Again, in terms of, I'm not involved in politics, I'm a political scientist, so I find these very interesting phenomena. And that's the development of alternative media. There was a media blackout after the emergency, the state of emergency. But quickly, the internet provided a venue, and many YouTubes or Facebook accounts emerged, talking or communicating with people outside of Armenia about what's happening. But at the same time, the role of blogs. We always look at blogs as, what I think about today, what kind of a mood I'm in today, but it was actively used by politics. This is not my field, but we have fellows in Policy Forum who have actually worked on this and are interesting looking at the blogs as the cyberspace version of civil society movements. What did Policy Forum did throughout this whole process? Basically, as things were unraveling in terms of elections, results coming in, we were compiling data. We had people all over. We were communicating individually with our fellows, senior fellows and fellows in Armenia, and also all over the U.S. And at the same time, when there was a media blackout, Policy Forum website became one of the major sources of news feed in terms of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And of course, the creme de la creme, basically, in my opinion, I think, is basically a hardcore data analysis of the elections. And we can find this on the Policy Forum website and also in the report. But there were many, again, analysis which was compiled by Policy Forum people, individuals, and fellows, and in terms of generating the graphs. And the best thing is that we just didn't rely on our own analysis and data, but we also used official statistics about polling, about exit polls, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go over these in detail, but just a quick overview. This is a sample of what we have in the report, but not the only sample for those of you who are afraid of statistics and so on. It's the bulk of it is analysis and more social science approach, if you want to call it that. All due respect to economists, I think it's also social science, but it's more science than social. Than political science. But these are some of the examples. These, again, showing the relationship between what turnout and candidates vote. So as turnout increased, or Sarkisyan had more votes, again, this was a discrepancy that showed to what extent people were pushed to vote for a certain candidate, or were intimidated to not vote for a certain candidate. Each block, by the way, represents a polling station. 1923 voting booths in Armenia. By the way, this one is also interesting because it shows the voter discrepancy in Yerevan, the red dots. It shows voter turnout in Yerevan, and then the blue one shows voter turnout outside of Yerevan. And as you can see, outside of Yerevan, it's not a perfect bell curve, showing that towards the end of the day, you had more and more people forced to go to the polls and vote, which is something that it's easily done outside of Yerevan because people would not be as easily basically informed and knowing their rights than in the city. So again, you had that kind of a discrepancy. Again, invalid ballot versus voter turnout. At some point, when you had more votes, more voters turning out, you started seeing more invalid ballots, basically leading us to conclude some of the conclusions, and these are just preliminary conclusions. I don't think we can all say that they're definitive. But either people who were stuffing the ballots, they didn't pay attention to allocate votes to different people, and they just started putting invalid votes. And because of that, in the heat of the moment, they just couldn't commit fraud in a very fraudulent way. It was sort of shows that. But again, this is not my field, this is not my forte, but you can find in-depth analysis in the report. What conclusions can we get from this whole thing? I think to a large extent, what we witnessed in the South Caucasus this year between elections and between wars is that Russia has clearly is trying to exert its presence in the region. One thing about elections in Armenia, by the way, Bedrosian, which is widely recognized or considered to be a pro-Western leader, especially during his presidency, during his election, his rhetoric was very much pro-Russian. And even at some point, he did make a trip to Moscow. A lot of people say that he just went there and didn't meet with anyone. But the fact that you have someone who's recognizing that Russia is a major player and changing his rhetoric from Western to pro-Russian, or let's say not anti-Russian, shows to what extent that Russia is dominating politics, or at least the minds of politicians in the region. South Caucasus now is very much, I think, within Russia's grasp, mostly because of the fact that what happened in South Ossetia. I don't think anyone can argue that Russia is not willing to go to length or use force to achieve whatever it wants to achieve. As a repetition, I think this is important to keep in mind, it wasn't unexpected. South Ossetia was not unexpected. But Russia's reaction and Russia's basically use of force was overly out of proportion. But I think to a large extent it is also because Russia wants to show to the rest of the world, especially to the West, and more specifically to the United States, that we are not the Russia that we were under Yeltsin. We are very serious when we talk about our backyard, the South Caucasus being our backyard. But at the same time, sending a message to all the three countries, the leadership in three countries, that this could easily happen to you. Russians are not hesitant to use force, and this is one of the things. If you have a president who flies a fighter jet to Chechnya after the war, Putin, I'm talking about Putin, I think that also sends another image about being a tough man and not hesitating to use force. And the question that we might have in our mind, at least in my mind, is whether or not the South Caucasus is witnessing a new mini Cold War status, which can increase once in a while to escalate into full-fledged war, like it happened in South Ossetia. But to what extent are we witnessing sort of a balance of power system where, unfortunately, the West is absent and Russia seems to dominate, but then the actors themselves, the South Caucasus countries, are unaware or unwilling to recognize that, or some of them at least, that Russia is the major player. And as of today, I think what we need to look at is, regardless of its foreign policy or domestic politics, the proximity of the South Caucasus to Russia makes all activities, political activities, or whatever activity, whatever action a politician takes, they need to keep one eye on Moscow and what, especially Putin, rather than Medvedev, what they want or what they express in terms of whatever developments are happening. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward for your questions and comments.
All right. We will now turn to Professor Kojin, who, in addition to the things I told you earlier, is here today because in early October he traveled to Armenia as part of a delegation to share the experiences of the 9/11 investigation